Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Blue Heart Podcast. I'm Lieutenant Joe Pangaro, and today is a very important topic that we need to talk about. The reality of law enforcement, a career in law enforcement, it is a calling. Like many other very personal careers that we can choose, law enforcement is one of those things that people are drawn to it. And anybody in law enforcement will tell you that there's a lot of complainers. You probably know complainers. They complain about everything about the job, but they don't leave. They stay because it becomes part of who you are. Unfortunately, another part of law enforcement, another reality that we have to deal with, is the fact that many of us will commit suicide. It's a topic that a lot of people don't want to talk about, that a lot of people have a hard time with, but it's something we have to talk about because you don't want to be a person who finds yourself in such a low place you decide to do that, or a friend of yours, or another brother or sister officer. So we're going to cover that today. But first, I want to talk about our sponsors real quick. Okay, you can see up here, Blue 360 Media, the greatest publisher of all time for anything law enforcement and law related. My two books are on there, The Interview and The Investigation. You can go find them on blue360media.com. And then Medical Essential Diagnostics. Right now, they're New Jersey related, but they have 5 offices across the state. And any worker in the state of New Jersey, state, county, local, township, municipality, whatever, if you work for somebody in New Jersey government-wise, you can come in and get a full soup to nuts physical for you and for 2 adults in your family. So we want to be healthy through our career, and then we want to, tear the pension up for a long time. So you want to be healthy. So medicalessentialdiagnostics.com and Blue 360 Media bring all of this together. So my guest, waiting patiently here, is Sergeant Michael Sugrue. Michael worked for the Walnut Creek, California Police Department. Michael has an amazing book that's out there. We're going to talk a lot about the book today, and I want you to go get the book, because understanding what's going on, and if you're suffering, you're in a place, I think what you're going to hear from Michael is going to help you. His book is Relentless Courage, Winning the Battle Against Frontline Trauma. I've been monitoring this for a long time, since I first found out about Michael, and this book is just blowing up everywhere, and that's a very good thing, because people are reading about it, they're learning about it, and they're starting to talk, and Michael is a pioneer in starting this conversation and getting out there. So Michael, welcome aboard the Blue Heart Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So could you give us a little bit about your background? When did you get into law enforcement? What were you all about? What was Walnut Creek all about?
Absolutely. So I was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area. I come from a law enforcement family, so I knew at a very young age that I wanted to go into the profession. And in college, I studied criminal justice. Right out of college, I went into the United States Air Force, into security forces. I was a commissioned officer. And security forces is basically law enforcement, anti-terrorism, force protection, air-based ground defense, nuclear security. I ended up serving 6.5 years active duty all over the world, from the Middle East, South America, Europe, all over the United States. I got out in 2004 as a captain, and I went straight into civilian law enforcement back here in the San Francisco Bay Area. Worked a bunch of different assignments, from patrol officer, field training officer, detective. I was undercover 2 years on a state drug task force. Eventually promoted to sergeant, where I was running patrol teams on the street, and I was also a PIO, public information officer. I retired in 2018 for what I like to call post-traumatic stress injury versus disorder. And now I'm literally on a mission to smash the stigma when it comes to talking about mental health.
Amazing career. Thank you for your service in the military. I didn't serve in the military. So anybody who did, you protected my family, and I can't thank you enough, and all of the veterans out there. Michael, I know what got you on this path here was that you had some difficulty, you had some trauma in your career. You came across something, an event that took place in your career that officers train for, they think about, but for most of us, we never get involved in any kind of an event like you did. Why don't you tell us about that?
So I was actually a brand new patrol sergeant. I had just been promoted, and I had 2 weeks on solo. I was running patrol teams, and my shift started the night after Christmas, December 26, 2012. And I remember going into work, everything was normal. It was quiet, and it was my Friday. We were going to be off for a few days. And a little bit after 3 a.m., so about 4 hours, where before I was supposed to be going off duty, a call comes out of a woman inside a condominium and a man armed with a knife. It turns out that there was actually a couple that was barricaded inside their bedroom, and there was a subject with a huge butcher knife that was stabbing through their bedroom door trying to get to them. And I was first on scene. Another officer showed up right behind me. When we get there, we hear blood curdling screams coming from the distance. And this is a condominium complex, so two-story attached condominiums, multiple buildings. I didn't know where this unit was, but we literally just started running towards these horrific screams. As soon as we got in front of the condominium, it went dead silent. So from this blood curdling screams to just eerie silence. I knew I had more officers coming, but it was just myself and another female officer. We announced ourselves, nothing, no movement, no noises. I try kicking open the front door, it doesn't work. My partner notices a huge window. It's a louvered window the size of a door. It's completely shattered into the condominium. Again, announced ourselves several times, nothing. She goes in, I go in right behind her. We're right in a kitchen area. There's glass everywhere. I go left, she goes right. I end up clearing the whole downstairs, like family room, living room area. Don't find anybody. No signs of a disturbance other than that kitchen area. And then I meet my partner at the base of a stairwell. And so now we're shoulder to shoulder, guns are out. She's to my right, and to her right is a solid wall. And then the staircase, you can see on the left, upper left, there's some kind of opening. We don't know if it's a hallway, a bedroom, or a landing. We're announcing ourselves, and then moments later, a male subject comes out, but we can only see the left side of his body. We can't see the right side of his body. He's sweating profusely, eyes wide open, literally just staring straight through us. The best way to describe it's like something out of a zombie movie, like literally not real. And we've got our guns out. And we're saying, "Show us your hands! Show us your hands!" Nothing. No reaction. No facial expressions. No body movement. I don't remember eyes blinking. Moments later, he comes fully out. My partner yells, "He's got a knife! He's got a knife!" And in his right hand, he was clenching a full-size kitchen knife. By this point, two other officers had come into the condominium. I told one of them to get the taser. He positioned directly behind myself and that first female officer. And the fourth officer went perpendicular to the stairwell. And so now we're giving commands, drop the knife, guns are out, no reaction. And then suddenly he takes the knife up in a stabbing position and starts coming towards us. I shoot, other people shoot. I don't know if I've hit him. He ends up at the bottom of the stairwell. Two of the officers retreat to the family room, living room area. The male officer had the taser. He deployed that and then dropped it. He now has his firearm out, and we're literally just a few feet from this subject at the base of the stairwell. And he's still clenching this full-size kitchen knife. And all we know is he's between us and that couple upstairs. And we don't know if they're dead, if they're bleeding out or dying, but we've got to get to them. And so now, again, guns are out. We're yelling at him, "Drop the knife, drop the knife." He starts coming back up with the knife. I shot, my partner shot. He was killed instantly. I mean, his wounds were absolutely just devastating. Blood everywhere. His eye was gone. We already had medical staging. I had an officer check his vitals. There were none. I cleared medical to come in. And I had officers go upstairs to check on that couple. And thank God we got there when we did, because literally they were barricading their bodies against the bedroom door, and it was coming off the hinges as he was stabbing through that door with this knife. And I have no doubt, had we not gotten there when we did, that they would be killed. No doubt whatsoever. But that incident, it broke me, because for so long, for so many years, being exposed to hundreds of traumatic incidents, I never talked about them. I never processed them. I just kept them internal. I never decompressed, and they just bottled up and bottled up. And that shooting, literally, it started a whole downward spiral. And eventually, too, we were sued almost immediately from the family members of the man that tried to kill me. And we ended up enduring a 4-year federal lawsuit. But that incident is what changed everything for me.
All right, there's a lot there to unpack. A lot of officers, new officers might be watching. I'm sure eventually. Now, what did was the guy? Was the guy with the knife? Did he live in that house, or was he just attacking these people?
So initially, I thought it was a stranger that had broken into the condominium, but after the incident, we later found out that it was actually one of the roommates that lived there. And here's the kind of ironic thing, and I think that's what makes this so difficult for me is that even today, years later, we don't know why this guy did what he did because this guy had no criminal history. He had no history of mental illness. He did have some drug use, and there was some drugs found in his system, but he was actually friends with the other male victim. So there was three guys that lived in this condominium. One of them was away for the holidays, and earlier in the night, the boyfriend and girlfriend and the suspect had all been hanging out. I mean, literally, they were like exchanging gifts, eating pizza, watching a movie, and eventually, the boyfriend and girlfriend they go up to their room like around 9 o'clock at night and the girlfriend passes out. The boyfriend's playing Xbox hours into the night. And the victims later testify and describe that the suspect, around 3 in the morning, comes into the room with the same look, just eyes wide open, sweating profusely. He doesn't say a word. He literally jumps on the bed and starts trying to strangle to death the male roommate. And they end up calling his name. He doesn't respond at all. I mean, no reaction at all. And these guys are both wrestlers, but by the grace of God, somehow the boyfriend and girlfriend get him off of him. They get him downstairs, outside the condo. They lock the front door, and that's when they run up to their bedrooms and call 911. And that's when the suspect broke through the window, opened the kitchen drawer, grabbed that knife, and went straight up to their bedroom door and was stabbing through the door.
That's tough scene for everybody. It sounds like, excuse me, that obviously the shoot was called a good shoot, and you were good.
Absolutely. They did the DA did their investigations, investigation. We ended up having coroner's inquest, and it was absolutely good shooting. We saved lives. None of our officers were hurt. You know, None of us wanted to take his life, but we had no other choice. And yet, still, we endured a 4-year federal lawsuit. And so the shooting happened December 27th, 2012. I ended up as a defendant in federal court in San Francisco in September of 2016. And we endured a full 2-week jury trial.
This is a part of police work that people don't think about. The first time I got sued, I got that letter in the mail. They were naming the township, all the other officers, and me personally for $1 million. And that really shook me up. I mean, I was just doing my job and I'm getting sued for $1 million, which at the time I didn't have $1 million. I had a young family. I remember going to the captain and saying, hey, what is it? He goes, don't worry about it. The township's going to pay them for whatever it was. You're okay. Everything's good. But it was nerve wracking. It was nerve wracking. And I could understand going through the experience you did and then getting sued. The stress just probably never stopped. I'm guessing, that's what it sounds like. I'm glad you were found that it was a good shoot, because it sounds like it was a good shoot. We've all been in those positions. I think you do this long enough and you're going to come across those kind of things where people are just out of their minds. We don't know why they're doing what they're doing. Drugs, jealousy, whatever it is, but they go off, and we have to make those split-second decisions. So I think for the officers out there listening, a couple things. Going to a domestic like that, where people live together, they know the house, seeing these kind of strange understandings, protect yourself. Be prepared for anything that can happen. Now, I know you should have been taught or trained in the academy somewhere, the 21-foot rule. I'm sure you knew that one. Somebody has a knife, they can get to you and stick it in your throat before you can respond if they're 21 feet away. And you think 21 feet's a long way. It's not. It's like lightning. So being prepared is, I think, first part of this. I've talked to other officers who've been down this road as well, and it's something that can stay with you. And I know before we move into how this trauma affected you, Michael, I can tell you that there's conversation out there that every officer runs around with ghosts following them around. You go to a call and you see something horrific, or somebody dies while you're trying to help them or whatever, and these ghosts can follow you around. And I think you said a key thing here is that it was a buildup. It was a culmination of many, many, many attacks on you, on spiritually as a human being. We're not killers. No matter what the public says, we don't go out there to kill people. We use force when it's absolutely necessary. And unfortunately, sometimes people die. But the reality is most of us are just good people. And you get put in a situation where you have to do something that has catastrophic effects for people sometimes. Sometimes we lose the battle and officers will die. So I'm glad you survived it, and I'm glad all your people did. I'm sure there was an element also there, just from hearing your story, of being the supervisor. You can't help but feel, you have concern for everybody there. You're responsible for them. Even though everybody's an officer, you're responsible for them. So that adds to it as well. So I'm glad everybody came out of it good. I'm glad it was a good shoot, and good for you that you got home that night. That's the key. It's a shame that somebody lost their life, but I'm glad you and your people came out all right. So when you said this was the last straw kind of a thing, kind of tipped you over the edge, what happened? What were you feeling and seeing, so that if anyone out there is listening to this and you might be in this situation, listen to someone who's gone through this. And if you can identify things that might be happening to you, try and get some help. So how did this proceed from there? We know the stress and the lawsuit. What were you feeling personally?
So I'm going to go back to when I started the police academy, because I made a huge mistake. And, I talk about this in the book, and I want people to really hear this. But I made a decision, a fateful decision, that I would never bring work home, that I would never discuss the job with my family. And I thought by doing so, I was protecting, my loved ones, my wife, my daughter. And so, up to this point, I've been 8 years as a civilian police officer. I had served 6.5 years in the military. And I never once talked about all these horrific things that I was dealing with at work, the fatal car accidents, child abuse, the sexual assault cases, the suicides, the homicides, even just the natural deaths. And when I came home in a bad mood or pissed off, my family was walking around in eggshells around me, because they thought it was something they did. And they had no idea it was because of something that I had to deal with, that day at work. And so I really advocate for people not to do what I did. Don't share the graphic details, but have that healthy, open communication where you can express, hey, look, you know what? I had a really bad day today. I just need like a half hour to decompress. I'm going to go for a jog, or I'm going to hit the gym. I'm going to come back and shower. Then we can talk about it. I can kind of share my day with you, and you can work on it together. So I didn't do that. And so when this shooting happened, you know, I didn't have that healthy relationship. I didn't have that form of communication. So when the shooting happened, I didn't talk about it at all. We were ordered not to talk about it because of the dual investigations and the lawsuit. But as you know, there's certain people we can talk to. We can talk to therapists, we can talk to priests, we can talk to our spouses. These are all protected forms of communication. But I didn't take advantage of any of those because I didn't believe in therapists. I didn't have that relationship with my wife. And outside of that, I was ordered not to discuss it. So, I'm bottling this in. I'm starting to have horrific nightmares. This face, literally, I couldn't get it out of my dreams. This guy that tried to kill me, that almost killed me. And, the key there is that I'd been involved in a lot of very dangerous situations. I mean, even 2 years as an undercover agent on a state drug task force doing high risk entries, sometimes multiple times a day, in drug dealers' houses and horrible neighborhoods. But this incident, for whatever reason, it literally took away my feeling of invincibility in a split second. I mean, up to that point, I felt invincible. I felt like nothing would ever touch me, nothing would ever harm me. And so after that, I had this constant fear of dying and this constant fear of my young daughter at the time. Because when the shooting happened, my daughter was only like 2.5 years old. And I kept thinking, like, if I get killed, if I die in the line of duty, my daughter's never going to know who I was. My daughter's never going to know how much I love her. And so I'm at home, I'm isolating, I'm having these constant nightmares. And what do? I start to drink more because drinking, it numbs the feelings. I drink till I pass out, but then the nightmares still happen. I wake up the next day and now I feel even worse because I'm hungover. I had these horrific nightmares. My spouse is pissed off at me. I'm isolating to where I don't want to go to any social events. I don't want to go to family events. I literally just want to be in a room by myself. And I'm literally pushing everybody away. And that was the start of the downward spiral, and eventually just things got worse and worse and worse as time went on.
There's a lot there again, Michael, for people to listen to. You know, we know that in law enforcement, it's kind of a joke that people start drinking and they get divorced and they have all the work that we do. I always said if a regular person came along, the ride along is nice. They get to go for a ride along, they see a car stop, maybe they see somebody acting up, but it's the daily activities, like you said, when you come across, you go and you see a child that's abused, and that will stay with you. You go and you see a death scene where someone, died and nobody knew they were dead, and you ended up going there and they were dead for a couple of days or a week, and you see this human being actually destroyed in their house. It's the thousands of little things that build up on. And what do? How do we handle it? We laugh, we make jokes. I can't tell you how many times I go to a scene that was horrific, and the senior officers that were there are making all these jokes back and forth, and I didn't find it funny. I was horrified at what I saw. I was okay doing the work I had to do, but people laughing, and I didn't quite get it until somebody explained to me, well, what else are you going to do? You're either going to laugh or you're going to cry. So we make jokes, and you start to see that it's a survival mechanism. And when I came on in 1985, there was no counseling for anybody. You went to a car wreck where three little children are killed in a car wreck, and you're expected to, mop it up and then go to lunch and then go answer your next calls. And that just became more and more obvious to me that there was problems. And one of the things I had sent you an article that I had written, The Tragic Toll of Police Work. I wrote that because two people I knew that were law enforcement officers killed themselves. And when I knew them in life, I never would have thought that they were somebody who was having such problems that they would take their own life. And it shocked me. It really shocked me. And I started looking into, and then I find out cops do this all the time. That I never had that situation, but I know it's prevalent in our profession. And I started to realize that we do hide these things. We laugh, we joke about it. And really what we should be doing is bringing it out, talking about it, venting this horror from each other. And there started to be a movement in New Jersey anyway, where they started to consider having counselors available anytime there was a really traumatic call, and they would bring somebody, but they usually brought in the two cops who were there and not everybody. And I started thinking about it, and I got the chief to agree that anytime we had something like that, everybody who was involved, the dispatchers, the patrolman who never got inside, everybody should get together and talk about this, because that's the only way to take the power away from these ghosts. And coming through my career, what I say now is those ghosts are still with me. I can still recall them. I can still remember the old man in the ambulance who was having a heart attack, and I climbed in the ambulance to, say goodbye to you, and he held my hand. He goes, "Officer, I'm scared. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. I know I'm going to die." And I said, "Listen, you're not going to die. You're going to be okay. You're getting to the hospital." And then I got a call from the ambulance service about 20 minutes later. He coded in the ambulance and he died. And that shook me, that, I was the last person really to talk to this guy, and he was reaching out saying he was afraid. And did I handle it right? Did I not handle it right? And I started to realize that those things over time would build up on someone, and that is maybe why they would do it. So we don't talk about this enough in our profession. It seems like one simple thing, but it is a lifetime of traumas that we laugh at or put aside or bury underneath. And human beings can't do that. You can't see the things we see every day and not be affected by it. So I get where you're coming from, because when I saw your book and when I saw about you out there, I said, "Oh, yeah, that was the tragic toll of police work." I kind of got that too. You've taken it to a new level. You've actually done something about it. You've lived through it, which I think adds an enormous amount of credibility to the experience. So if you could take us from where you were having difficulties now, and what happened next.
So during this period of waiting for the the lawsuit to go to trial, and I told myself the whole time that, all my problems were related to this lawsuit, and once it was over, I could just go on with my life. And the horrible thing was that with this pending lawsuit, we had depositions every year, different court proceedings. And so this incident that I wanted to forget, this face that I wanted to get out of my nightmares, I couldn't. I had to remember every finite detail because eventually I knew I was going to be a defendant in federal court. And in fact, I was. And so during that period from the shooting to when it went to trial in September of 2016, I had lost my marriage. My hero, my stepfather, the reason I became a police officer, he got diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer at 58. He died a few months later. I started getting repeated skin cancer diagnoses, which I truly contribute to the stress. And literally, my whole life was fighting apart. I was fighting for custody of my daughter, my everything. And so when the trial ended, I remember I woke up that next morning and I thought, now I can start the healing. Now my problems are going to go away. But the trial, in fact, made things much, much worse because I had to sit there for 2 weeks, listen to all these crazy expert witnesses, saying all these theories that we, planted the knife. The guy was never a threat. We were cold-blooded killers. And, the family members of the guy that tried to kill me were in the courtroom feet behind me. And one thing I didn't tell you is that the guy that tried to kill me had an identical twin brother, and he was in the courtroom as well. So this face, literally, that was in my nightmares all the time, was sitting just feet behind me for 2 weeks straight in this courtroom. And so after the trial ended, I really started to second guess myself, even though I know that I did everything right, that I had no other options. I started just thinking, like, what if I would have paused here? What if I would have hesitated there? Maybe this guy would still be alive. Maybe, I wouldn't have had to take a life. And that's what I think people don't understand is that, I have to live with this for the rest of my life that I took a human life. It doesn't matter that the shooting was good, that it was justified, that I saved lives. Like, I have to live with this. And it's something that I will never, ever forget. And it started getting so bad that I didn't want to be here anymore. I got to the point where I wanted to die. I literally started putting myself in dangerous situations on the job, hoping I got killed in the line of duty, putting all my officer safety, my tactics away, rushing into dangerous situations and scenarios that I talk about in the book, hoping that somebody would take me out. And while this is happening, so the trial ends September 2016. Fast forward just a couple months to November 2016, about a week after Thanksgiving, I'm on duty and I'm getting ready to go home. I'm the day shift sergeant and a suicide in progress comes out. Turns out it's my best friend, John Davison. John Davison is a Vietnam veteran. He was an Army MP, but he was also a 35-year reserve officer with my department. And he rode with me for many years. He had retired a couple years earlier. And it turns out it was him that actually tried to kill himself. And I got to the trauma center as the ambulance is bringing him in, just covered in blood. He's in and out of consciousness. He had slit both wrists, stabbed himself in the torso multiple times, OD'd on multiple prescription medications. And I remember sitting there for hours while he's in emergency surgery, just feeling this overwhelming sense of guilt as to why I didn't see the signs. Like, why didn't I realize my own best friend was suffering? And I started to blame myself. But all I could think about then was my 6-year-old daughter now. And what is she going to think? What's going to be the effect on her when I die in the line of duty because I'm trying to get killed? What's going to be the domino effect on her future children? And a month after that, thank God he survived and he's alive today. And I remind him of this, but he saved my life by trying to take his own life. Because a month after that, on the anniversary of my shooting, so December 27th, 2016, I broke down. I literally broke down in a parking lot for 2 hours by myself. And I finally got the strength and courage to pull up my cell phone. And I called the on-duty watch commander and said, look, I need help. I can't do this anymore. I need help. And that phone call changed everything for me. It saved my life.
That's amazing, Michael. It's and I don't have other words other than amazing. Going through this experience, hearing it, it's powerful. And there's other officers going through it today. There are other officers that are going to survive it tonight and other officers that are not going to survive it tonight. And, you know, having been through my career and being a leader and being rising to the rank of lieutenant, I always see that as like a tribal leader. You know, you're helping everybody. And I hear the words that you say that, you know, you're questioning, could you have done this? Could you have done that? And the only thing I can offer to you is what I would offer to anybody. You didn't create that situation, you know, and don't take this as I'm patronizing you. I'm not. It's just hearing your words. It's what I would tell any friend of mine. You didn't create that situation. You reacted to that situation. You reacted exactly how I train my cops to respond. They are not there to get killed, beat up, or stabbed. They're there to do a job. And if somebody causes that situation, you do what you have to do to survive and get home. And that's what you did. And that was the right thing to do. And I know it's hard probably to wrap your head around it, but that's what I'm hearing. And that's what I'm offering to you, because I teach these cops these same things. And it's not just words. We have to understand it. I've been in situations where I thought I was going to shoot somebody. And I thought about it later on and actually talked to the guy. And I said, what were you thinking? You almost just made me kill you in that parking lot of that motel. And he says, I wasn't thinking. I just wanted to get out of there. And I was just reacting. So people put us in those positions to have to take action. And you were put in that position and you acted appropriately. You saved yourself, you saved the officers under your command, and you saved those people in that room. And while that might be hard to hear because it might sound different to you, that's a reality. And that's what you did. And if that helps, I hope. You know, we probably talked to thousands of people, and I'm just Lieutenant Joe giving you my 2 bits, but that's what I hear. And that's what I would tell anybody hearing that kind of a story. You know, we are good people that go into law enforcement. We try to help. We try to do the right thing. People put us in a bad situation. We're not killers like TV tells you, like lawyers might want to tell you. You know, we don't go to work every day. Oh, let's go get this person. Or let's go get that person. We go out to do the job. And sometimes we're put in very, very bad, dangerous situations, and we get to survive, right? We're not just rogue people that strap on guns and go out to harass people. We're doing a job in society that society needs, and we get to protect ourselves. So that's my soapbox for you, hearing your story. That's what I would tell anybody, Michael. So where do we go from here? You're feeling like that. He saved your life. How did that clear your head? Did you feel your head being cleared at all? And then how did you move to the book?
So that started my process of recovery. And, you know, fortunately enough for me, I got connected with a culturally competent therapist, somebody who only works with first responders, military members, who truly gets it, who truly understands us. I started seeing her every week. She told me about these first responder support meetings that I never knew about, I never heard about, and they're confidential. They're not affiliated with any agency. They're run by volunteers, and literally they're just discussion meetings. And that's where, for the first time in my life, I heard my fellow brothers and sisters, you know, paramedics, firefighters, dispatchers, cops, who were sharing their struggles and their stories. And, you know, not just the street trauma, but the things at home, you know, the health problems, the administrative betrayal, the institutional betrayal, moral injury, all these different things. And, you know, because for so long, I thought there was something wrong with me. I thought I was the only one that was feeling this way. And it turns out, of course, that my feelings were normal. It was all normal. It was a normal reaction to the abnormal things that we have to see and deal with. And so I'm going to these meetings, I'm going to the therapist. I eventually found out about the West Coast post trauma retreat. I went to that. It was absolutely life saving, life changing program. I still volunteer there now as a peer. And I was on the road to recovery. My goal was to go back to work because this is all I've ever known. This is all I've ever wanted to do. And unfortunately, during my recovery process, it wasn't fast enough for my administration. And a certain administrator literally turned their back on me and tried to outcast me and tried to get me to retire. And then eventually dropped these bullshit investigations on me and literally almost pushed me over the edge again to the point where I literally wanted to take my life. And thank God I used my resources. I ended up getting through that, but I had to hire another attorney. So I have a work comp attorney, an LDF attorney, this bullshit investigation held up my retirement. Cause at that point, I'm like, screw this shit. Like, I'm going to retire. Like, I found out I was just a number filling a position. It didn't matter that I gave my all day in and day out, but I couldn't deal with the fact that my own agency wasn't going to support my recovery, wasn't going to welcome me back to the only thing that I knew. I mean, my career was off the charts and I wanted to be chief of police someday. That was my goal. But I found out that, again, if I wasn't coming back right now, they didn't want me at all. And this is a theme that in the book, and I'll get to how the book happened, but this is the number one thing that is resonating most with all the readers and listeners because it's never talked about. It's the dirty elephant. It's that thing in the room that nobody wants to acknowledge because you know what? Usually it turns out that we're all getting screwed. We're being ordered by our administration not to talk about these things, not to talk to other people about it. And it turns out that it's happening to all of us. And this, in my opinion, is what causes the suicide epidemic. The horrific things that we see and deal with on the street, they absolutely take a toll and they contribute to this. But in my humble opinion, what pushes people over that ledge into suicide is when their blue family or their red family turn their back on them when we need them most. And so I medically retired in 2018. Now I could have just gone away, lived a quiet retirement life, and spent time with my daughter, and nobody would have heard from me. And I was ashamed. I'll be honest with you. When I retired, most people other than my administrators had no idea what I went through. They had no idea, all the things I was experiencing. They had no idea that I was literally wanting to die in the line of duty. And this guy I didn't know, he reached out to me on LinkedIn. I was on LinkedIn. I was putting things out there about mental health awareness, suicide prevention, but I wasn't sharing my story. These were like other people's resources and their stories. And this guy reached out to me. He knew I was into fitness. He was big into fitness. And it turns out he's a former police officer. His name was Danny Bird, and he ran a podcast. He asked me to be on a show, and I said, you know what? I'm not interested. Like, I'm humbled. I appreciate it. I don't want to do it. Thank goodness this guy harassed me. He kept bothering me. He kind of backed me in a corner and got me to agree to it. He's like, look, dude, he's like, I'm going to drive the 2.5 hours to you. You name the spot. I need an hour of your time. And I finally said, okay, I'll do it. And so I ended up meeting this guy in the back of a Mimi's Cafe. I thought we were going to have breakfast, get to know each other. But he's like, hey, dude, I've got to get out of here in an hour. So we're going to just jump in this. And he had a video camera, laptops, headphones set up. I sat down and he started asking me questions. And without hesitating, without trying to like craft my answer or worrying about how it sounds, I just answered from the heart, from my heart and soul. And here's where the magic happened. This is what changed everything again for me is when he aired this episode, I thought for sure, people were going to send me like nasty messages and people were going to look down upon me and I'd be shamed. And that didn't happen. What happened is I started getting messages from all over the world, from the UK, Australia, Canada, on how my story was their story. And these people that I didn't know started sharing their deep, dark personal stories with me. And it gave them strength and it gave them hope. And this was healing for me as well. And so that led to just podcast after podcast. Eventually that led to public speaking. Now let's get to the book because this is a cool story. So right before COVID happened, again, LinkedIn's a magical thing. Dr. Shauna Springer, I didn't know her. She is a clinical psychologist. She's a Harvard graduate. She had written 3 books. She worked for the Department of Veterans Affairs and Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. So she's a culturally competent clinician. She just sent me a message and said, hey, I would love to have a discussion with you just to see what you're doing, tell you about what I'm doing and see if, we can help each other out. So I'm like, yeah, sure. Let's do this. So she calls up, we're talking. She tells me about the work that she's doing and I tell her my story. I mean, my whole story. And she literally afterwards was just like, have you ever thought about writing a book on this? And I kind of laughed and I said, I've been asked this before. I said, but with post-traumatic stress injury, like I don't have the focus, the concentration, the drive that I once had. And I don't think I can get a project like that done. And so we just left the discussion at that. A couple weeks later, she hits me back up and she's like, look, Michael, and now we haven't met in person. This is only our second phone call. She says, I can't stop thinking about your story. She said, I've heard hundreds and hundreds of trauma stories in my work as a clinical psychologist for the VA, but your story is sticking with me and it's going to help save countless people. And she said, I want to do this book with you. I want to make this happen. And without meeting her, I knew in my heart, I said, let's do this. And literally COVID happened. And so again, we never met. We started doing Zoom meetings every week for 2 hours. And it was like, I think 80% into the project, we finally met in person. And the thing is, this book, Relentless Courage, Winning the Battle Against Frontline Trauma, there is no other book out there like it. And I'm going to tell you why, because it's got a very unique format. Every chapter has two parts. The first part of every chapter is my story told in my voice, all the way back to childhood until present day. But the second half of every chapter, Dr. Springer comes in as a psychologist, breaks everything down. She explains it, explains why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, explaining the effects of the trauma, of the admin betrayal, the effects on my family, on my loved ones, on my relationships. And truly, we show the human side behind the badge and behind the uniform. And we also show a pathway to recovery. We show how to get out of this. And I'm living proof that no matter how dark it gets, there's a whole new life on the other side of this. And this book, it's saving relationships, it's saving careers, but it is saving countless lives around the world. I mean, literally around the world.
Michael, that's a wonderful thing that you've done. And I can hear it in your voice. You're very articulate. You're very clear on what went on. And I've watched this book explode all over the internet. And I read the reviews and I get that. And I go back to my soapbox for a minute, and doing what you had to do that night led you to where you were, to that book. And that book now has saved more people, right? So it's really a saving grace that happened, though it was difficult for you as an individual to go through. What you've done is you've saved. There's cops out there tonight that are alive with their families in recovery because of what you went through, and that you chose to express it. As hard as it might have been, you have saved even more lives. So first you saved those people in the building, you saved your cops, and now you saved your life, and you've saved thousands of more people around the world. That is a fantastic, wonderful thing to do with a career. And it's wonderful to have heard that story from you directly. So I'm going to tell everybody out there. Now I'm going to talk to you. If you're sitting in your house, your apartment, your car, your cop car, wherever you are, and you're having these kind of thoughts and feelings, I know we hear about it all the time. Say something, feel something. Listen to what Michael is telling you. If you feel any of those kind of things, if you're thinking any of those kind of things, there's light at the end of the tunnel. You can save yourself. What do we find out about suicide? We find out about suicide that many people who survive it will tell you, the minute I did it, I wished I hadn't. I know out there by you in San Francisco in the bridge, people choose the bridge because it's very foggy, you can't see, and they step off. And there's a young man, he's out there, and he does a speaking engagement. He was suicidal. He got on the bridge and he stepped off, and he survived. And he said the second he let go of that railing and stepped off, he wished he hadn't done it. He knew that there was something better, and he survived.
Yes.
So we can
Kevin Hines.
survive. Yes, right. Amazing, amazing story.
Yes.
Great young man.
Yes.
So if you're thinking this, if you're feeling this, if you're not even sure, reach out to somebody. Get the book. Talk to somebody. Save your life. You're important. Whatever that trauma is, don't let the trauma beat you, right? We do what we do. Life gives us what it gives it to us, but your life is valuable. Every life has great value. And Michael, I can't thank you enough for coming on here and offering your story to the Blue Heart podcast audience. So let's see. So the book is Relentless Courage, Winning the Battle Against Frontline Trauma. Can you hold that up so everybody can see it? Let them
Absolutely.
see that. And where can we get that? On Amazon?
So the book, it's on Amazon, it's on Walmart.com, BarnesandNoble.com. It's also on Audible. It's on Kindle, paperback, hardcover. The actual Audible version, it only came out last July. So it came out over a year after the book first got released, but we recorded it in our own voices, both Doc Springer and I, and it is powerful. I mean, literally is I had to relive every one of those events in that recording studio. And so when you hear it, it is straight from our hearts and our souls. And so I encourage people that, like you said already, hey, if you don't feel comfortable talking about this stuff or seeking out help, you can read this book or you can listen to it on Audible in the privacy of your home, of your patrol car, wherever you are. And you're going to realize very quickly that you're not alone, that what you're going through is absolutely normal. But more importantly, you're going to find out about a bunch of resources you've never heard of. And in the back of our book, we have a whole section of vetted resources from, 100% confidential, free hotlines and text lines to free retreats and week-long programs that you can go to across the country to recover from post-traumatic stress injury.
That's amazing. And I know you told me you're in two films. So there's a short film that Michael sent to me, and I'll put the link in the connections for the shows, because we do the audio show on jpangaro.podbean.com. And then we have the YouTube show where you can actually see Michael's handsome face as we talk about this at Blue Heart Webcast. And I will put all the links to the books and to everything. But Mike, you said there was two films. We'll hit that real quick. One was a 9-minute film that you sent me so I would understand a little bit about your story. Very powerful, gives good background. And then there was a second one you said was Residual by Doug Haynes was the director or the writer?
Correct. So the first one, it's called The Stigma of Help, and it's made by Mission 22, which is actually a nonprofit founded by an ex-Green Beret. And it's for combat veterans and first responders dealing with post-traumatic stress injury. But Stigma of Help is free. It's on YouTube. You can just type it in and it'll come right up. It's only 9.5 minutes. The second film is a full-length documentary, and there's actually a couple different versions of it. But the producer is Doug Haynes. It's called Residual, and it features a bunch of different people, from clinicians to first responders to all different forms of alternate therapies. And again, it's free. You can go right on YouTube and type in Residual film, and it'll come up. And I highly encourage people to watch both of these films.
I do too. I'm going to tell you to go out and get it. And like I said, I'll put all the links in the thing. To end on a hopeful note, the fact that you're here and you're with us and you're with your daughter is a hopeful note. People can survive these feelings. Feelings can be overwhelming, and they can lead us down paths that we never thought possible. But to know that there's hope and that there are resources and you're not alone. People care about you, right? All the men and women in blue, we care about you. Reach out and get these resources. Michael, like I said, I want to thank you very much again for being on here, taking the time to give us your story. I think it's absolutely wonderful, and I am glad you're here. I feel better that I know you, that I've spoken to you now and hear this story. So, ladies and gentlemen, remember, you have a lot of choices. Choose to save yourself. Choose life. There is hope, right? There's always something we can do. Reach out, talk to somebody. Don't take yourself out. Michael, thank you for coming on. And as time goes by, I'll reach out again. Maybe we can have another conversation and talk about some other areas here to go.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being
here. Thank you very much.
No, my absolute pleasure. All right, everybody, the Blue Heart Podcast. I want to thank you all for being here. And this was an important show. Tell your friends about it. Everyone should probably listen to it and listen to Michael, hear what he has to say, right? We all want to be here at the end of the day and tear up that pension and enjoy our lives. We do a great, police work is a great career, even though now it seems wacky. It is a good service to the public. You're doing something for a greater good than yourself. That has value, just like you do. All right, remember, be a part of the solution, everybody, not a part of the problem.